Digital Media 2021 organized by VAN-IFRA. My name is Krishna Prasad. I'm a journalist, an editor, and it's my honor to host and moderate this panel discussion on the transformation and growth of digital news businesses going forward from here on. Over the last 3 days, we've heard many speakers and thought leaders share their thoughts on the digital future. Listening to so many of them and listening over the past few years, you wonder if the future is in the future, or is the future already with us in the present, in the here and now. But there's no question that the COVID pandemic in a way has kind of been the accelerator for everything that we are discussing now in this current conference. So in a sense, the digital future is not an option, it is an imperative, is the point that I think we've heard endlessly over these last few sessions. It's really not an avenue, it's not an option, it's not either or. I think it is something all of us really need to get into. And that's the short point. It's not something we can postpone, it's not something we can deal with later, it's something we have to deal with here and now. So after hearing all of these eminent speakers, it might seem as if there's very little for us to discuss at the end of this 3-day session, at the very fag end of it. But still, there are 2 or 3 persistent thoughts in my mind. One of them is, do these digital models of North America and Western Europe and Australia or even East Asia, do they have any great relevance for us in South Asia, is a question I often ask myself. It's just in the privacy of my own mind that I can allow myself to ask these questions. And the other question I kind of pick up whenever I listen to speakers from around India is, do these digital models of these English language players, do they have any context for regional language level players? Is again, is that model of English language publications something that language paper publication should follow, is a question that is dogging my mind. And again, a third corollary to that question is that urgency that the English media now demonstrates with digital media, is that same urgency also informing the responses and impulses of language media, is a question I ask myself very often. But these are questions in my mind. We might not end up discussing all of these questions, but I have 2 fine minds from 2 different corners of India, from 2 very different languages of India, from 2 very big newspaper groups of India, to throw some light on the way forward. On the left of your screen is Miss Mariam Mathew, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Manorama Online, the new media group of Malayalam Manorama. And on the right of your screen is Mr. Bharat Gupta, Chief Executive Officer of Jagran New Media, the digital wing of Jagran Prakashan Limited, which is one of India's largest print media groups. So let's hear from Ms. Mariam Mathew first up. The Malayalam Manorama, as so many of us know, is 132 years old. At one time, as every general knowledge quiz told us, it was one of India's largest selling newspapers. It now has a presence in radio and television. And of course, it's big online. Manorama Online was launched in 1997 and relaunched in 2002. And Ms. Mariam Mathew has been CEO of that for a while now. So let's hear from Mariam and take it forward, Mariam.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna Prasad. I'm going to share a screen and just talk on 3 slides, basically. And then we can go ahead and... So the conversation here is basically the discussion topic we had talked about was transformation and growth of digital news business, right? And we've been, like you said, we've been around in this industry for 23 years now. Whether it is outside the country or whether it's US or Europe or anywhere else, we've realized that in this small corner of Kerala, we've realized that digital has been very important for the last 23 years. It is an important part of what print, it's a natural transition for print, and we've taken this as that itself. So it has always been something which we've taken as seriously. It has not been something which we thought was something we should just do as just an also-ran stuff. And we felt that it was something which was important even for, in terms of business, in terms of bringing in revenues. But essentially, the 3 pillars of transformation that we've looked at, and this has been consistent, except what is in there has changed a bit, is credible and quality content, user-centric approach, and non-intrusive and targeted advertisements. If I had to talk about the three pillars of transformation of the digital news model, it would be these three, right? So content, users, advertisements. Now, when we talk about content, let's talk about local content first of all. Like you rightly said, I mean, local content is really what reigns supreme at the end of the day. I mean, there is a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of content out there. But what is important is what is important happening in your neck of the woods. And what we realized long ago was that we did not want to be part of the noise, but we wanted to kind of, but before hyperlocal was even, a concept that everybody talked about, we wanted to kind of emphasize that this is a local, what is important out here. And the other thing about this content is, I know we bandy out numbers of millions of traffics and things like that. That's changed. What is important right now is engaging content. It is not important to bring a whole bunch of people in there, but what is important is that get people to stay there and engage in it and be part of your conversation. So when we talk about transforming the news model, it is transforming the way we talk to people. The way it's been in traditional media has been that it's been a one-way conversation. This is a multi-pronged, multimedia, and a multi-way conversation which we have. And at the end of the day, for that conversation for us to have, we need to have credibility. We have social media, we have different kinds of, noise all over. At the end of the day, it comes back to the same thing, which is we need quality journalism. Quality journalism is the most important thing. It's a voice of reason. And to get this quality journalism, we have to pay for quality journalists. And that is a new age journalist. The new age journalist itself, when you talk about transformation, has changed completely. They are not text heavy writers. They're not journalists. They have to kind of think multimedia. They are neo-social influencers. They have many roles to play as such. So it's not just a role of writing that story, but thinking through how that story evolves. And the most important part of content, which is now changing, is the personalized content part of it. I think it's a mobile-centric world. We're seeing newsletters are becoming the most important source of information for a lot of people. So curated content versus a lot of stuff going on all over the place. So if I had to talk about transformation of content, this is what I would talk about. Now, when I talk about transformation of users, see, I mean, at the end of the day, many years ago, I had the opportunity to have dinner with Jeff Bezos. And one of the first things I asked him, what is the ethos of Amazon? The first thing he said was customer-centric approach. That is the most important thing. And I think a lot of times media companies forget that. I mean, they're in so much of a hurry to be that media company in the fourth estate and giving news. We forget that there's a user reading it, right? I think digital brought that out for all of us. That it is important that we have to understand the user, what their preferences, and give them stories that they would be interested in. And when we do that, we also need to be able to make them feel that this is something which is of value to them. So it's something which they will be willing to pay for, which comes to the whole model, which is a subscription model. I mean, we've all been going free, everything. We talk about free internet, but internet costs, producing that content costs. And if we can get that customer to value the product that we have, then we need to create subscription models for that. And beyond that, it is about customer privacy. So we're talking about, I think morning sessions were about removing third-party cookies, first-party data, and it's about hybrid events like this, right? So we're getting customers to talk to each other and talk to us through these kind of virtual events. That's what we talk about when we talk about user-centric approach. And then we talk about advertisements, right? I mean, there was a time when all our websites were looking like Christmas trees. We had like hundreds of banners coming, pop-ups coming. This is completely, that's the complete no-no of customer, experience whatsoever. Nobody wants to see ads coming. Today is a day of, but people want ads. Funnily enough, and you see there are enough studies which show that people actually want ads, except they want ads which are non-intrusive, which is not in your face, and ads which work for them. So what we're trying to do is, so the changes that's coming in this kind of field is basically strict privacy norms. And you can see even recently Google announced yesterday that they are not even going, despite third-party cookies, they're not going to follow users. I mean, these are things which we are now appreciating, and we're kind of saying that, listen, as a user myself, I don't want you to follow me for everything that you're doing. But if I am willing to give some sites some information, and that is where I want you to give me some, something which is relevant to me. So with new MarTech tools and which new kinds of advertising and first-party data where I am getting involved, I as a user am getting involved in the traditional media, I would like to get advertisements which work based on that. And of course, again, another big thing which is changing is native advertising. So instead of the banner advertising, we're now talking about native advertising, which is much more, intuitive and much more interesting even for the users to use. So we have a whole bunch of sites right now who are doing so much of interesting native advertising. Then honestly, that's what resonates in the market. So if you talk about transformation growth of digital news business, I mean, these are the few things that we can kind of spend time and see how this is completely transformed. And like you rightly said, I mean, it is post-pandemic, things have completely changed. I mean, what was growing at a good enough rate has doubled for most of us. Traffic has doubled, revenue has increased in the last 1 year. And surprisingly, it's shown that there was always a bunch of people there who wanted it, but we needed to give it to them the right way, and the right push was needed for them to try and experiment it. So that really is my quick, hopefully quick enough recap of what is happening. You're on mute.
No, I was about to say that typical mistake of online Zoom conferences. I was asking you, the transformation we all talk about, we've been hearing this word endlessly, but sitting in this position now in 2021, does transformation kind of look like an event to you or a process to you? Is this an ongoing process? Because in newspapers, we would create a newspaper, redesign it 5 years later, and so on. We had that luxury. But in this digital world, is transformation an event or a process, or it's almost always ongoing?
Transformation is a process which is always ongoing. So, and when it comes to technology is changing on a regular basis. So I always say that in our line of business, we have to always see not only what kind of stuff is going on, what kind of technology is, and identify what works for the future. There's so much of stuff, and it all looks very good, right? Especially all these shiny new technologies. So even to identify what is the one or two things that we need to do, what works for our users, and like you said, the nuances are what is important, right? So what works in the US and Europe, on a whole, it might work everywhere else, but the nuances, what works in Kerala is not what works in, say, Delhi, and it is not what works in Bihar. So those are the things where we have to, where I think, again, as a local player, it becomes more important for us, because we understand, hopefully, our users, that we can help, provide those nuances that they require.
Super. Before I come to Bharat, here's just a short notice. There's an opinion poll, a survey going on the website of Vanifra as we speak. There are a couple of questions. I invite participants to please poll so that we can take up some of these questions. But before I go to Bharat, once again, one little short question to you, Mariam. This is a question we can always keep asking. How many engineers and techies do you employ today? And what is the percentage compared to journalists that you employ? Because we are all playing this catch-up game with Silicon Valley. I'm trying to understand from you, are we trying to push the ball in any way by hiring techies, coders, engineers, designers and developers, so that we are one step ahead of Silicon Valley or the rest of the competition?
So I have 20% of my team are techies and designers and all that. Remaining are all journalists. Plus, I have journalists from the print team. So I have a large group of journalists. For us, the ethos is finding, at the end of the day, it's all about content. I really, really think technology is good. Technology is a backend, and technology should be there without making any noise. And, we as media companies may not be very good in technology in a lot of things. So it's not always good to kind of get, as my philosophy is, I can't get 500 tech people here to sit and create things. I'm happy to use good and interesting tech, which is all over the world. But what is my forte is getting good news there and good stories there, and bringing those stories to people who want to read it, right? So make it interesting for the people, ask them to come there and, live the story, which is what we want to do. And that is what is, that is the most difficult job, because it's a very creative job, and it's a job which changes on the go all the time. And it needs a lot of thinking.
There is an answer for the first of those opinion poll questions. The question was, where do we draw our inspiration from? North America, Western Europe, East Asia? And the answer is quite interesting. 33% prefer North American experiences, 17% prefer Western Europe, and 33% prefer East Asia. So East Asian experiences and North American experiences are kind of close. But thank you very much, Mariam, for that. Let me come to Bharat. I don't know if Bharat knows, but he and I have something in common, which is Mysore. I was
Yes.
born here, I was educated here, I'm sitting here in Mysore. And Bharat, like his former Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav, was educated in Mysore. He did his BE in Mysore. And Bharat is, of course, CEO of Jagran New Media, which is the new media wing of Dainik Jagran, one of the world's largest newspaper groups. And besides all the other hats he's owned, Bharat has played a role in the creation of Vishwas News, which is the fact-checking division or the fact-checking website created with the help of IFCN, of which again Bharat is a part. So, Vishwas is again a very important factor because I think fake news is a really important topic for many of us to discuss, not just in English, but in the languages. But that's not the topic of this conversation. But Bharat, from your perspective, let's hear what you think is the transformation route forward.
Thank you so much. I have something to present. I'll just quickly share my screen. And I hope this is visible.
Yes, it is.
Super. So I think basically when we started our journey, I'm a numbers guy, and 4 years back when the transition began, we quickly first took a look at the landscape. And at that point, India had about 400 million internet users, poised to grow to 735. And a quick dipstick through the survey revealed that by 2021, when out of the 735 million internet users, out of the incremental users, 5 out of 10 new users would come from Hindi heartland, and 9 out of 10 new users would come from language. So I think this was a defining point, that especially for language publishers, because in India, language is the largest media in terms of consumption, in terms of population, in terms of reading habits, right? So this gave us a great confidence about the potential that existed, and that English is that internet is not going to just get limited by English language alone. So keeping this insight in mind, what we quickly did was that we did a survey, and I'll talk about it later. But the core mission of our online wing was factual and credible content that empowers New Bharat through knowledge, information, and point of view. And the core business proposition which we thought about was 1, build scale; 2, drive impact; 3, make sustainable. So what do we mean by that? So India is a growing market, and there are a lot of users who are coming in. One of the key challenges for publishers is how do you grow audiences, or how do you reach out to new audiences? So which means essentially discovery, that how do you use platforms or technology to reach out to new audiences? How do you scale advertising or advertisers to build your sustainability? And finally, how can you add authoritative voices to your platform so that there is a impact in society, or there is or you are able to create factual and credible content, establish that, which is the biggest challenge of internet as a medium. Second, impact. Once you're able to build scale, so forget the PVs. I think it's the share of mind, and more importantly, what is the impact of content and technology on a progressive society? What is the impact on a business environment? Are you able to help your advertiser grow in this system? And overall, I believe that India has a lot of potential, because right now we are a growing economy. So until and unless all of us we work together, we will not be able to enjoy that fruit. So what are the efforts which we are putting in to grow the digital ecosystem? Because it was very small. When we started our journey, it was less than 1,000 crore pie. And today, while we speak, it is more than 16,000 crores advertising pie, right? So what are the efforts which you are making to make the pie grow? And finally, make sustainable. So the sum of all efforts is scalable and sustainable business model. So how do you diversify revenue and audience streams, build scalable and sustainable tech which is future ready, and most importantly, culture. I think this is the backbone of any business, that how do you ensure a data driven culture which is, and a team which is very progressive in nature. So keeping this in mind, our first objective when given to us when we discussed with the management was that in 4 years time, we need to be in terms of scale amongst the top 10. In terms of impact, there was a certain revenue target, audience target, and some benchmarks that were fixed for industry. And finally, we had to be sustainable by FY20. So the first journey coming from a traditional media company was that if there is a lot of population which is going to consume content in language and 5 out of 10 new users coming from Hindi heartland, then we wanted to understand using audience science that what is it which these new users are consuming? Because India today, as we know, 65% of the country is less than 35 years old. So they are consuming differently. And a lot of them maybe are not even exposed to the traditional print brand. So not necessarily whatever content which we were producing for print would have exactly worked on digital. And that is where we went in for a research. We tried to understand these audiences. What are they consuming? When are they consuming? How are they consuming? In what format are they consuming? Short, beyond news, what are they consuming, the categories, and that gave us a good insight on how should we shape up our product strategy. The second and the most important thing was establishing a content differentiator. So one, we wanted to establish that we are a factual and relevant content provider. So which meant or translated into more of data-driven content insights, right? So it's very easy to say that this article is great in newspaper, but how often do we see a great article driving a spike in circulation? And in digital, unfortunately, that is the truth which we face every day. If our article is great, then it has to translate into time spent or page views or number of users reading that article. And that is the culture which we have to develop within the editorial mindsets. In terms of research, the more research which we put in into a story, the more factual it becomes, right? And for finally, consistency, that are we able to produce that kind of content repeatedly? Second, credible. So it's easy to say credible, but any journalist cannot be a master of all. So how do we involve specialists into our content programming so that there is more credibility to the content which we create? So if we are doing anything about COVID, so let's say involving a doctor or involving a health officer who is also commenting along with your stories, because that is what gives credibility to your content and helps you to stand out. And finally, a long-term vision, that empowerment, that using all this content, are we empowering the society, our audiences? And that is the single most important role of any media company. Often, recently in the past, we have seen several instances which are debatable about role of media. But I feel that as a media company, our number one mission is to ensure that we as a country is one and we are growing. And as a media, how are we responsible for empowering our users with the right kind of information? The key challenges which we faced for audience growth. So the potential was there, but different audiences consume or behave differently. How do we engage audiences? Because there's no dark to content. So right from TikTok kind of a content to a lot of entertainment-based content to even images that get floated around WhatsApp or Snapchats, right? So there's all kind of content, and the challenge was that the consumption time was reducing. So earlier, a 3-minute video was regarded as short. Today, even 30 seconds is long. So these were some of the challenges. Earlier, a 1,000-word article was great. Today, a 200-word article is again considered to be long. So these were some of the challenges, and we had to face these challenges and come out with the right kind of content strategy, that how can we use technology to connect the right kind of content with the right kind of audiences. And finally, once you have the audience with the right content strategy, how do you monetize them? So programmatic or advertising-based monetization is one. And of course, if the engagement is high, does it open door to subscription? So some of the solutions which we deployed, we came across this about 2 years back. And there are some data tools by Google called real-time content insights. So this tool, it gave us the understanding who is your audience, where are they coming from, what are they consuming, when are they consuming on a real-time basis. And this dashboard which our editorial teams, they use first thing in the morning. And this is continuously running on their screens, because this gives them the insight on what is trending right now in India in terms of consumption. And around that, they're able to get a depth of what kind of content is getting consumed in which part of the country or across different categories, and it helps them to start the day with a basic kind of a programming. Then on the depth side of our content, there's a news consumer insight, which talks about NCI tool, which talks about how engaged are your audiences with you. So for example, all of us are looking at overall users, but the reality is how many users come back to you repeatedly. So what are your repeat users? And as a subset of that, how many users come back to you more than 15 times in a day? Because as publishers, our objective is that the users should consume us, more of us, and they should frequent us more often or multiple times in a day. That is our ultimate objective. But where can we get those insights from? How do we create those audience funnels? And there are some of these fantastic tools which are free, which give you these newsroom insights. And I feel these tools are imperative for any modern newsroom. And finally, in terms of monetization, how do we do yield management? What kind of optimizations can be done? So keeping these three pillars in mind, we set our target that we want to achieve a target of 100 million users, be amongst the top 10 news players. And in terms of horizontal, we felt news alone will not suffice. So we need to expand into education for youth, a women website for women, and a health website as a category, and of course, fact check. From an audience perspective, in terms of scale, we said we need to diversify business solution, moving away from display ads alone to content syndication. So content which we are producing for our own website, are there any other outfits out there who are willing to pay for that content? For example, OTT platforms or aggregator apps and XYZ, or branded content. So a lot of advertisers, they're looking for branded content as an opportunity. Then how do we expand client pool? How do we use tools like SimilarWeb to understand market share? Because the best thing about digital is everything is measurable. So there is no if and but. Everything is very clear, transparent, and measurable. So ultimately, we have to work on an ROI. And finally, authoritative voices. So can we draw partnerships with authoritative voices to increase credibility? So we reached out to organizations like IFCN, the Fact Checking Network, or United Nations, UNODC, WHO, and stuff. And even in India, so we try to create a team of specialists who could work with us. And the end result was that when we started the journey, so if you look at March 2018, we just had 43% traffic coming to our website directly, and rest of it was on third party like UC browser and stuff. Today, while we speak, more than 74% on an increased base is consuming us on our own website. And brand loyals have increased from a less than 1% to more than 10%. So brand lawyers are users who consume you more than 15 times in a day. So there was a lot of data science which was involved, right? And the first milestone as a result that we wanted to be in top 10. So if we look at ComScore, we crossed 85 million benchmark, and we were amongst the top 10 news and info player. And the same thing applied even to video. So even when it came to video rankings, we were ranked amongst the top 10. So this was scale. In terms of horizontal, we launched Beyond News to expand it to Jagran Josh, which is education website. We have more than 27 million users over there. We have Har Zindagi, which is for women, about 11 million, for health website, about 4. But the idea is that it's important to set milestones, because if in absence of milestones, we are pitching in the dark. And once you set milestone, it gives you the ability to work towards same. Then in terms of impact, because of COVID, a lot of things happened, and we tried to come out with special advertising programming around positive news, or getting recognizing industrialists or advertisers through special programs, and creating online events or third-party partnerships in terms of, for example, audio. Everyone talks about audio, that audio is the next big thing. So we reached out to Amazon for Alexa. We entered into a partnership, or with Google. And, I'm very proud to say that we were able to expand from a text-only journey to a video, and then soon followed by audio. And finally, in terms of impact industry, what can we do or how can we collaborate together? So we worked very closely with be it Google, YouTube, Facebook, or IMA around what is it required to grow the landscape? What are the key challenges of publishers, of advertisers, of policy and XYZ? How can we collaboratively work towards coming with the right kind of solutions? And all of this, the net result was that not only a shared increase, but there was a tremendous growth in terms of audience, in terms of monetization. Our house inventory, which is unutilized inventory, fell down from 65% to 50%. The eCPM increased by 20%. The engagement increased by 20%. The recirculation reach increased by 15%. And if I show you the revenue curve, so like we grew by 16, 24. This year was a little difficult, but this is something which is very interesting that in 2017-18, more than majority of our revenue was only ad driven. But today, on an increased scale, we have been able to diversify into subscription, into syndication. So I've reduced the dependency on ad alone, and we have entered into great content partnerships with a lot of Indian players or international players. And even the pandemic was a period which gave us the chance to experiment with subscription. And today, 1% of our revenues are coming through subscription. And I think one of the key thing responsible for same is that something which I personally follow, that how can we maintain transparency? So with our teams, the vision and missions are very, very clear, and they translate into KPIs. Second most important thing is measurability, that each and everything is connected and measurable, and in digital everything is data driven. So how can we translate that into performance dashboards, into tools? And finally, once your KPIs are set, your dashboards are transparent and ready, how do you set accountability in terms of performance appraisal, in terms of learning and development? I think this is something where a lot of organizations, they shy around, and it's my personal belief is the more we invest into learning and development, it is better for us, because digital is ever changing. The human behavior is changing by the day, by the months, and the technologies are changing. The medium of consumptions are changing. So it's an ongoing process. So it's very important to stay up to date, and including the teams who should be exposed and trained by the best. So a lot of dashboards were developed, and finally, a culture rating, and all of that resulted into a great EBITDA rollout for us. So I think since last 6 quarters, we showed a positive result, and this financial year we entered into a positive EBITDA. So I think the reason to show this is that a lot of us have been always talking about and thinking that whether the digital business models, are they sustainable or not? I think, yes, they are sustainable. You have to make them sustainable. But the question is that how do you prioritize that? So if either we make money or we don't make money, and it is very important to set the priorities right, especially in times like this, especially in this year when because of the lockdown, India is suddenly 5 years ahead of its consumption curve. So it is imperative for media organizations to create a pool of your digital specialists, align them with the right kind of objectives, which should be a sum total of financial objectives, your customer objectives, and a culture. And I would say I would rate culture at the top, because no matter what we do, if we are not able to change the culture within the team, it is very, very difficult to grow in this agile medium, because this medium is very, very agile. Yeah. So that
Super,
was from me.
Bharat. That was good. That was long but good. Let me take the second opinion poll question, the answers of which are around us. The question I asked was, do language newspapers in India, do they need to adopt different strategies compared to English language newspapers and English language publications? And 57% agree with that proposition, that they must have a different strategy. Since both of us are Mysoreans, can you explain in Hindi very shortly, संक्षिप्त में आप बताइए 3 advices जो आप स्मॉल और मीडियम न्यूज़पेपर्स को दे सकते हैं जो ऑनलाइन स्ट्रेटजी फॉलो कर सकते हैं? क्योंकि जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, आप हम दैनिक जागरण की बात कर रहे हैं, टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया की बात कर रहे हैं, मलयालम मनोरमा की बात कर रहे हैं, सबके पास इतने पैसे नहीं है, सबके पास इतने रिसोर्सेस नहीं है। आपके शब्द में सिर्फ एक वाक्य में तीन पीसेस ऑफ एडवाइस क्या होंगे आपके?
तो सबसे पहले मैं ये कहूंगा कि अपने ऑडियंसेस को ठीक से हम समझें। सबके लिए सब कुछ नहीं बनाया जा सकता। अगर हम ये सोचेंगे कि हम एक ही चीज से सब टाइप की ऑडियंस को केटर कर लेंगे तो ये कभी नहीं हो सकता है। तो जितनी भी ऑडियंस है, अगर हमारे पास इंडिया में 500 मिलियन इंटरनेट यूजर्स है, उनके अंदर हमें सेलेक्ट करना होगा कि हमें किस ऑडियंस को केटर करना है। नंबर 2, हम लोग एक कंटेंट कंपनी है, तो हम एक टेक्नोलॉजी कंपनी नहीं है। तो बहुत ज्यादा टेक्नोलॉजी में इन्वेस्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं है। हमें ऐसे पार्टनर्स और सोल्यूशन ढूंढने चाहिए जिनकी हम टेक्नोलॉजी को रेडिली यूज कर सकते हैं और अपने बिजनेसेस को एक्सपेरिमेंट कर सकते हैं, एक स्केल पे ला सकते हैं। जब वो स्केल को क्रॉस कर जाए तब हम सोचे कि क्या अब वो समय आ गया है कि हम इस एक टाइप की अपनी टेक्नोलॉजी के ऊपर इन्वेस्ट करें। एंड लास्ट बट नॉट द लीस्ट कि एक कल्चर है, और आज के डेट में अगर 65% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन जो है वो मिलेनियल है, तो अपना जो टीम का भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है उसको भी उसी चीज को दिमाग में रखते हुए करना चाहिए। जो हम कंटेंट भी क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, अगर आपने उसी 65% ऑडियंस को आपने दिमाग में रखा है, तो वो कंटेंट प्लानिंग भी वैसी होनी चाहिए, वो ऑफिस का कल्चर भी वैसा होना चाहिए। एंड व्हेन आई से ऑफिस का कल्चर, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि यंग है, मिलेनियल है, ऑफिस में पार्टी हो रही है, बट इनकी एक्सपेक्टेशन डिफरेंट होती है। सो इनके साथ जो सबसे बड़ी चीज होती है कि ये लोग बहुत ज्यादा हार्ड वर्किंग है, लेकिन एक ट्रांसपेरेंसी मेंटेन करना बहुत जरूरी है, इनको मोटिवेट करना बहुत जरूरी है, इनको रिकॉग्नाइज करना बहुत जरूरी है। तो वो जब हमारे बड़े लोग जैसे जब काम करते थे, एक समय था कि कोई भी रिकॉग्निशन नहीं मिले फिर भी सब लगे हुए, बट अब वो समय चेंज हो गया है। तो वो टीम को रिकॉग्नाइज करना, उस टीम को मोटिवेट करना बहुत ही जरूरी है, और एक डायरेक्शन देना।
सुपर। Mariam, I can't speak Malayalam, but I'm sure you understood that हमारी पारी हो रही है यहाँ पे. And so how do you know all of you guys are extremely moneyed, extremely old institutions with deep pockets and deep resources. What is the advice you will give to small and medium newspapers who are looking for some way out of this morass? What is the advice you would give? 3 small pieces of advice. Actionable pieces of advice.
This is, exactly what I said, in the beginning, the first slide, which I said, there's 3 things which I talked about. One is credible and quality content. Secondly, user-centric approach. And 3, non-intrusive targeted advertisement. And one more piece of advice, which is with that user-centric approach, we should get it into a subscription paywall that people will pay for our content as well. Especially for medium and small players. They have some really good content out there. That's why they're there. And they should definitely get people to pay for their content. And that is showing also in, for example, Substack or some other newsletter services where individuals are making money just out of writing a good curated newsletter. So content. If you tell me one word, it would be content.
Can you say that in Malayalam?
No.
Well, there was a third question we asked in an opinion poll, and that question was, are language news consumers as ready to pay for content as English language consumers? What has been your experience, Bharat?
For us, we tried with e-paper very honestly to begin with. So it worked quite well for e-paper. We got a great conversion during the pandemic, and we got annual subscriptions. We tried it with our apps. It worked over there. For website right now, it's a little questionable and in fact a little scary as well, but eventually they will, because all the indicators are there. So if we look at globally, the whole process of payment started first with music, followed by television, and now slowly towards text services. So the same trend has to happen in India also. So people, they first applied for Spotify, or they subscribed to some kind, Savan or some kind of a music service. Then they went in for OTT subscription, like a Hotstar or something else, or Netflix. So eventually that mindset will change, and they will be ready to pay, especially for credible and content with utility. So if we are able to drive utility with a strong differentiation, they will pay.
Mariam, have you tried something like that, where you make money from language subscriptions or whatever
Yes,
other.
absolutely. In fact, we, I think, went pay much before anybody ever went to pay, because when we launched our magazines itself, we decided that, I mean, unlike a newspaper, magazines had very niche content. So that content was never there for free. It was always behind a paywall. I'm thinking 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So like for Vanita and other magazines, like the niche magazines of ours, they were always behind a paywall. And of course, e-paper is behind a paywall. But now we're also thinking of website content. I mean, and the good thing is India has also started moving that way. There are a lot of websites, whether it's Business Standard or Mint, or I believe Hindustan Times has started theirs, Times of India, Hindu. They've all started theirs. And people are also getting used to it. Like Bharat mentioned, people are using now content, they're paying for content. So they're willing to, I think, and I hope that they're willing to pay for, good content. The point being that we have to, it cannot be stuff that is available. I mean, we cannot give news service and say, listen, pay for this. We have to give content which is unique to us, which is different to us, and which is kind of, which a user wants at the end of the day. And it has to be engaging. So a content which is a snackable content, which takes like, 30 seconds for you to read, is not going to be a payable content. A content which takes you, good 5, 6, 7 minutes to read because, you're spending that much time. It is somebody who wants to pay for that content.
Very quickly, sorry, please.
And what I think is that, a lot of times our subscribers have actually messaged us, saying that, listen, take out all the advertising, we'll pay just for the content. We are happy with the content. So, that's encouraging.
Very quickly, both of you, in just a sentence, do these new social media guidelines which the government has introduced, do you think that will benefit you, Mariam?
See, I think we're still studying it, but I think the social media guidelines have definitely, we've been asking for some guidelines, just because as newspaper organizations, part of this media companies, we have always been following a lot of rules and regulations. We make a lot of effort to have credible news. So when we have to then compete with platforms which have put anything and everything out there, it's very difficult. I mean, it's very difficult to compete with even fake news. I mean, that's become the biggest problem in our lives, So more to understand the nuances of this, I think it's going to take some more time. In fact, we've asked the ministry to give us more clarification on all the details of that. But I think it's a step in the right direction. Every country is doing it. Every country is recognizing that it's not that simple and it has to do something about it.
Bharat, do you think this will create a new revenue stream, this whole thing?
No, I think this guideline, as Mariam said, I would agree that we are still studying, and it has huge implications, not just for social media companies, but for all content publishers. And we are still trying to study the implications. Yes, content accountability should exist, definitely exist. And we should identify people who are trying to spread misinformation. But I think the way the guideline has suddenly come in, we are a little startled. We are not very sure about the implications. So we need time to understand the full impact. Yeah.
Well, absolutely the last question. And this is a general question, nothing to do with the transformation we are talking about. In all these events, we generally end up discussing more or less the same kinds of things. Numbers, eyeballs, visitors, uniques, this, that, and the other, monetization, and so on. Where do you guys place democracy in this process? Now, I ask this question because there is so much of an accent on short videos, short articles, on catching the millennials and so on and so forth, on engagement. But what is it that you're specifically doing, Bharat, to start with you, to protect India's democratic values?
So I think that's a very interesting question. And that's something which I mentioned, that how inclusive are you of voices? So I think the question is not just representing certain voices, be it government or be it our own voices, but also ensuring that voices of people are represented or voices of specialists are represented. So the whole idea of involving specialists is to be inclusive. So that's one way for us. Second, community participation, building and participation. So we have built certain communities, and you'll be surprised, these communities were built online and now have also translated into physical communities where we discuss with people and these topics and stuff. and come out with their point of view. Last but not the least, as an organization, the whole effort of Vishwas.news, our fact check organization, was towards arresting of misinformation, bringing out the true kind of information, especially during certain events which happened in India at different times, and which could have otherwise resulted into great society problems. But so I think information has a great role, and as publishers, it is important for us to present the right information.
Mariam, have you guys started a fact-checking exercise or a unit, or are you trying to do anything, because this is so important in the current milieu we live in? And how are you contributing to the democratic process?
So, frankly speaking, the first thing is, good journalism is important for vibrant democracy, and that is the ethos of Malayalam Manorama. Malayalam Manorama, its ethos is journalism with a cause. It's credible journalism. Nothing comes in the way. Not even business comes in the way of journalism. So that is the most important thing for us. At the end of the day, and as for fact checking, we're doing that regularly. In fact, it reached a point where especially when we had the floods a few years ago. This is where we had a tussle with even the search companies at Google, where what was happening is, with this great algorithm of them, we had so much of fake news which was going on, and people were kind of dependent on the news which was coming in when they're doing searches to get information. And they were then bombarding us on our phone lines saying, listen, we heard this, and and our news, for example, was kind of pushed right down because of whatever reasons that their algorithms were. And I called Google guys and said, listen, this doesn't work. You've got to put credible news up front. You can't put fake news out there and kind of expect people to listen to what is happening and then get panicked. So we've been doing, and so then we started sending out WhatsApp messages to everybody saying, listen, there are all this news out there. This is incorrect. Please, this is the correct news. So we've been fact checking for ages because it was extremely important, especially in situations like this where there's way too much of fake news and non-credible news out there.
Well, I think we should stop on that note. Ms. Mariam Mathew, Mr. Bharat Gupta of Malayalam Manorama and Dainik Jagran, respectively, thank you very much for joining us on this excellent panel discussion on the digital transformation, the way forward. And I thank all of you for joining me and the participants. And may I now please hand over the stage to Mr. Makhdoom Mohammed of Vanifra. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you, Krishna Prasad, and thank you, Mariam and Bharat. It was wonderful end to Digital Media India conference. Last 3 days, like in every session, every speaker, they really kept us on toes. Giving us various insights. I really hope and sure that all of the attendees who benefited from this exercise, and thank you all for sharing your knowledge and spending the time with us. Thank you. I'd like to thank all the attendees. Like, we had one of the very engaging audience today, like more than 200 participants finally registered, and then we had about 90 to 100 of them online all the time. That is a high engagement rate of 50%, which is like high for any online event, I think. In fact, I have seen online events have engagement of only about 33 or 35%. That is very good for any standard. I would like to appreciate and thank all the participants for their participation, and a lot of several questions that keep coming in. I'd like to thank them all. I'd like to thank our sponsors who made this possible, in this pandemic times when revenues are hit. We had like few who could really support us, like Google News Initiative, Chartbeat, Piano Media, Stevo DX, and PPI Media. Thank them all for their support. And we'll send the video, feedback forms, a link. I request all of them to please fill up the feedback forms. And end of the feedback, you'll also get a password where you could the link to download some of the presentations that are available. And then we also started uploading all the videos of the recordings of the sessions in our portal. Please, I request all the attendees to check and then check for the video link in our portal. Then we can watch them for long, and it will be at least there for 6 months or more in our attendees. And I'd like to thank my colleagues. Like, it is not a just one or two. There are a whole team at the back of it working for more than 3-4 months. I'd like to thank my colleague Vijayalakshmi, Suresh, Wilson, Leong from Singapore, and also Neha Gupta and Shilpa Elizabeth for helping in putting this together. really enjoyed doing this conference. I am sure that we'll all had a very good time. I look forward to see you hopefully very soon in person, and then come over this Zoom fatigue, and then we'll all hope to see you on another event and soon. And with this, we conclude Digital Media India 2021, and wish you all a good day ahead, and then see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.